Sandy, why don't you introduce Whitney and then Whitney can take it away.
Good morning, and I'm going to introduce you to my daughter, Whitney Wakimoto. She's spoken twice before, once a year, and today she is thrilled to be interviewing two charismatic people who are free at last. Whitney, would you like to do the introducing, please?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. So today I have the honor of introducing Loius Brash and Lee Gibson to all of you. Louis was one of my students in the very first class I taught at Lancaster with Leah Jokey, who is also on this call. And that was 3.5 years ago, maybe 3, 4, somewhere in there. And I met him on the B yard, and he then moved to the A yard, and now he is out and free, which is amazing. And I'm going to have him tell you more about that. And then Lee Gibson, he also was on the A yard in Lancaster at the California State Prison. And unfortunately, I didn't meet him while he was in there, but I met him on the outside during one of our conferences. And he's just an amazing human being. And I'm so excited to hear more of his story as well. So I'm going to turn this over to you guys.
Go ahead, Louis. I give you the honors.
So thank you, Whitney, and thank you everyone for having me and allowing me to share a little bit. So yeah, I think Whitney and I and with Leah Jokey, we first met sometime in 2016, early 2016. This is before I was resentenced. I initially had a sentence of life without parole. And sometime during the middle of 2016, I was resentenced. And when Leah and Whitney first came to the yard, she mentioned B yard, and the difference between B yard and A yard. B yard is a level 4 maximum security prison, and it's generally considered the worst yard of the prison. And a lot of times the staff would discourage volunteers from bringing programs to that yard. And that's, unfortunately, that's the case many times. But I was blessed enough for Leah and Whitney to fight their way over to the yard and bring such a beautiful program to the yard. We're talking about theater, which was a foreign thing that I'd experienced, and many of the men on that yard have ever experienced. So, and that's just when they brought that program, this was during a time a big change for me, because like I said, I came to prison. First of all, let me back up a little bit. I served 25 years. I was just released on April 10th. And I committed my life crime when I was 16 years old. So coming into prison with the sentence of life without parole, in the beginning, I had no hope whatsoever. And I lived my life, unfortunately, with that mindset for a very long time. So, and to fast forward in 2016, when I was resentenced, so my whole world was literally changing. My whole outlook, my perspective on things. Now I had this hope of being released. So I'm trying to really process that. And then this beautiful theater program comes in onto this maximum security yard. So if you can try to imagine all the different things that was going on in my personal life. So when they came over, I want to say that I was in a very good place in my life, probably for the first time. But there was still a lot of things that I was dealing with and sort of navigating with difficult emotions at times. And that's one of the beautiful things about, programming. That's one of the important things about programming coming to a facility, and not just programming, it's the people that introduce and facilitate the programs. Because when someone can come into a maximum security prison and look at an individual and look past the blues and look past the labels and see me as a human being, that means the world to me. And as far as reform, if we're talking about reform and rehabilitation, it's an ongoing thing. It's a process that, and it's not just applied on the inside. It's on the outside too. Out here in my life, rehabilitation, it's something that I work on every single day. And the beautiful thing about transforming one's life is, it's just it's like my whole mindset. I had to do a whole overhaul of my thinking, of my behavior, and the people that I surrounded myself with. And the beautiful platform about programming in prisons is that allows that space to happen. So like my journey, it's just been, I want to say some of the best times in my life have been spent inside a prison. And I know how crazy that can sound to a lot of people, but it's the truth, And a lot of people ask me, how has it been after 25 years transitioning out here? Because people would tell me that it's going to be strange, it's going to be weird, it's going to take a while. But to be honest with everyone, it's not difficult. And the reason why I say that is because if you're able to find freedom on the inside, when you come out, it's just going to be, your transition is going to be so smooth. And I think I was blessed enough to be able to find freedom on the inside, which is making my transition out here like just a beautiful experience. And I want to say, coming to A-Yard, that was a whole nother thing. And that's where I was able to meet Mr. Lee Gibson, which you'll be hearing from him. And the thing about A-Yard, the unique thing about A-Yard is that was a unique yard within the California prison system where there are no politics. And what I mean by politics, I mean gang politics, because in many prisons, gangs sort of control the yard and create this hierarchy where people follow this structure. And on A-Yard, people made the decision to go over there because they didn't want to be involved in gang politics. They wanted to change their lives. And for no other reason than to change their lives with no dangling carrot, no benefit. The only benefit that they're getting from changing their lives is for themselves and for helping others. So that was the unique thing about A-Yard. And going over there, when I met Lee, I mean, we immediately gravitated towards each other, I would like to say, because we were of the same mindset. And just, continuing my experience with Whitney, I was fortunate enough to be involved, participate in 2 other theater projects with Whitney. And, each time, both of those experiences have been transformative in so many different ways. And those experiences and that environment and my relationships with the people on the inside and how that's transformed my life from in there, those things they translate immensely out here, and which is why I'm fortunate enough to be on this panel with everyone here. And I guess I'll wrap it up by just saying, programming, when people can present and programs can present opportunity to people on the inside, that opportunity can turn into something so amazing. And I like to say that if we invest in individuals and human beings and not look at the incarcerated population as labels, we can make a lot of progress. And I like to think that, Lee Gibson and myself is just a living testament of what transformation, the possibility of transformation. Thank you, everyone.
I have to follow that. First of all, good morning, everybody in Montana. I'm out here in, it's overcast California, but it's nice anyhow. Thank you so much for joining. I feel like I'm looking at like my family, like all my uncles and aunts, and it feels so like surreal, I guess. So my name's Lee, as Louis Brash calls me, Lee Gibson. Um, it's uh, it's very nice to be here, and I'm honored and humbled to be able to join you this morning. Um, it is surreal to kind of be out here after spending 25 years behind bars. I too went in when I was 17, and I know Montana also has a law in their books where they sentence juveniles to life without parole. And it's one of those things, when you're a kid, you don't realize the impact of your choices necessarily, and the kind of how easy it is to get sucked into having bankrupt or faulty morals and principles. And it's really a slippery slope at that time and at that age. And so I fell into that category. I made some very terrible choices and harmed and hurt a lot of wonderful innocent people. And I ended up with a life without parole sentence also. And almost immediately before I was even arrested, I knew what I'd done was absolutely wrong. My father was murdered when I was 6 years old. And so I knew the impact of taking a life and what it meant. And I remember at a young age, I mean, at that time, that I just broke down. I completely had that was my bottom point right there in my life. And I vowed to never intentionally harm another human being again in my life. And when I was incarcerated, I stuck to those morals. And it's hard, like Louis was talking about, in those level 4s and maximum security prisons, to kind of walk that path. And I did. I never got into any type of violent confrontations while I was in prison, and I completely started to redefine who I was. And I redefined who I was through books that I was reading. I started looking for role models and people to kind of look up to through the novels that I was kind of going through on a daily basis. And so one of the quotes that stuck with me very early on was by Gandhi, of being the change I wish to see in the world. And I kind of lived by that. And as I was going through my incarceration, I just kept educating myself, not only higher education, but inner education, discovering who I was, who I wanted to be, who really lived inside of this shell. And so I ended up on A Yard in 2005 in Lancaster. And Louis right. It was a different type of setting. And what he means by programming is, just finding your daily rhythm of what you're doing, whether it's going to education, whether it's getting involved in sports, just pro-social activities. And that's really what kind of was the not only saving grace for me, but it was also gave me a purpose in life. And having no hope of ever getting out, that was my purpose, was to be that change that I wish to see in the world that I lived in. And so I was teaching parenting classes, teaching conflict management classes, anger management classes, just things that deal with cognitive behavioral therapy, and things that deal with expression, things that dealt with creative writing, finding other outlets for people to kind of really start to come into their own and discover who they were, because I knew how powerful it was for me. And so, yeah, and that was kind of like how I ended up doing my my time. And then fortunate, Miller versus Alabama came out with I think some of you have probably maybe heard of Brian Stevenson. He was the one that argued that case up in the United States Supreme Court, and it changed everything. At that time, California came out with Senate Bill 9, and Elizabeth Calvin, who is the lead attorney for the Juvenile Division and Human Rights Watch, really made a push to, or a concerted effort to change the laws here in California. And Louis and I were the recipients of that type of law change, because we were juveniles. We were afforded another opportunity to be able to have a chance to return back to society and start contributing in the best ways that we can. And it took a while. There's a lot of court procedures, and they want to make sure that they are not just returning people back to society just because there's a law change. They want to make sure that you're on the right path and you're doing the right things. And so there was a lot of vetting and a lot of procedures that we had to go through in order to return out here. And, you know, I've been out for just over a year now. I got out April 26th of 2019. And since then I've become involved in, at first I was involved in some wraparound services of helping people transition back into society and connecting them to resources, whether it was housing or employment. And then I found another job and another opportunity that actually helps me reach back in behind those razor wires and past the gun towers and give the people inside their hope, where I'm now advocating for policy changes and law changes and assisting those in there empower themselves with their own voices and their own inner transformation. And so I met Whitney and Theaters Works Project out here in a workshop that I went to. I knew that they were a part of AYARD. I personally wasn't a part of their program when I was in there, but I knew that they were really good people, and I wasn't wrong. When I first met them, they were a very lovely group, very small, tight-knit group, and their hearts were in the right places. And so as a community-based organization, it was really easy for me to kind of just fall in line with what they were doing and assisting in any way I can, and showing up at 7:30 in the morning before I even have my first cup of coffee to see you wonderful people. So, but what I really want to say, and I know that's a long way of giving an introduction of who I am, and I know Louis did too, and just curiosity of like how you feel and what you want to say, and questions obviously are, you know, on the table, and there's nothing that we wouldn't want to hear from you, especially knowing that we are getting involved back in, like, civically engaged back in our communities. And these are tough questions, and these are tough. There's some touchy and sticky subjects that may want to come out. And if you have anything that is on your mind, you know, we would more than welcome to have that dialogue with you and that conversation, and to be able to kind of explore our differences and our experiences or our similarities. Sandy is like, hi. So I'll be quiet and let you guys kind of go ahead and talk. Yeah.
This is for Louis. I want to know how you found inner peace inside, and I'd like to know what classes inside you think are worth keeping, and what you're thinking about as far as reconstruction of the prison program.
Thank you, Sandy. Inner peace. How I found inner peace inside. It's a long process. For me, it took me a long time to even begin to, I lived my life. So I was just talking about this yesterday. I was writing something about self-care. And for me, I had no idea what self-care was for a very long time, in most of my adult life. In fact, I was the opposite. It was self-destruct. That's how I lived my life. You know, on self-destruct mode. My behavior, my thinking, and though that became normal for me. My substance abuse, my involvement with gangs, you know, everything that I did was just self-destruct. And not only self-destruct, my actions were destructive to other people, you know, and I didn't care. That was probably the worst part. I just didn't care. So finding inner peace for me, I think the biggest shift in my life came when my brother passed away, when he was murdered in the community. My older brother, you know, we grew up. He was only a year older than me, so we grew up very close. And when I discovered the news of his murder, his violent murder in the community in 2008, you know, just that completely devastated me, just floored me. Um, and having that conversation with my mother over a payphone inside of a prison day room, that just I can't even begin to describe how it was just such a visceral and intense. It felt, the best way to describe it was, I felt like I was living inside of a nightmare. I was just completely devastated, and I honor my brother now because his murder was actually it just opened my heart, opened my mind, and opened my eyes to begin to look at myself and really connect the pain and the destruction and the harm that I caused to families, to individuals, to the community, to my own family, and to myself. I felt horrible when I told myself, when feeling the way I felt from my brother's murder, I thought about, for the first time in my life, this is what I caused other people to feel. And when I came to terms with that revelation, it was just such a huge, huge eye opener for me. And it really, really opened up my heart to begin to develop empathy. And what I mean by empathy is connection with other people. I'm really, truly putting myself in the shoes of the people that I harmed, and not just the people that I harmed, with everyone, walking through life, navigating life, not just from a self perspective, but really being conscious and mindful of how my actions affect everyone else, knowing that I'm connected to everyone and to a higher consciousness, to God. And
Louis,
so when
did
I
you
was
learn that in a class, or how did you have this revelation?
So this revelation came through self-reflection, introspection, um, and taking a hard look at myself. But it also came from my spiritual connection with God through my relationship with people. For me, there was no one thing. It was a everything. Connection with other people, relationship with other people, making positive decisions, taking a look at myself, my connection with God, taking classes, creating space and sharing space with people who are of the same mindset, of people who are trying to grow, making better decisions, challenging my own beliefs, consciously, actively trying to seek peace within my life on a daily basis. And I still do that. Peace is not something that, for me, it's not something that I obtain one time and then it's with me forever. Sometimes it's fleeting. Sometimes I work on it every day. If I could say that I have this peace that surpasses all and is with me every day, every hour, every minute, that would be beautiful. But that's just not the case. So it's something that I practice every day. And how I found that was with everything I just told you. And for classes are a big part of it, because what classes provide is a space for people to express, to grow. Because if you think about it, if you think of the prison environment, the prison setting, you have a yard filled with gangs, a yard filled with drugs, a yard filled with hardened men who wear masks all day. So it's very difficult to have a space out there when men can come together, and where they can grow, and where they can let down their mask, where they can be themselves, and they can explore difficult emotions, difficult things together and grow. It's hard to do that on a prison yard. So what programming does, classes, that creates space. And within that space and within that opportunity, like, so many things can happen. It's just unbelievable. And what I mentioned before with the people, it's the people. It's not just the space, it's the people within the space, and the people that come inside. And when they can share that space with individuals, like I mentioned, it's everything. It's everything. That's the importance of it. And different classes are important and specific for different people. For me, a big part of my growth is is my connection with God, as I mentioned, my Christianity. But it's also NA, AA, Victims Impact, theater. I love theater now. You know, I identify myself as someone who is an actor, who is a writer, who is a performer. You know, I can say those things about myself now. So I hope I answered your question, Sandy.
Thank you.
Lee, you want to go, or you want me to?
Well, the only part of the theater program that I've been involved with is out here. So my experience is a little different than Louis. And I think what he was talking about with the camaraderie that comes together within these groups or these classes is creating the arena to where people can really start to unpack their shames, unpack their I guess their build up their self-efficacy and their self-esteem, and being able to explore the person that really rests underneath all of those calluses that have built up with false ideologies, or the bad behavior, that being the go-to mechanism that was in place and that is kind of cultivated in a very tumultuous and violent and trauma-filled life. So I know that I used to pass by the classes, Jim, and I saw you too, Gary. I know that you wanted to raise a question, and I want to turn this over to Louis real quick. But Jim, I used to pass by these classes, and it was so funny because, and I say funny in the most loving and genuine way, but it was so funny because they would sitting there and like there's people with tattoos all over their faces, and I know that I was just out there on the yard with them, and we were working out, and there's like this whole like pit of testosterone like being spewed out there, and they go into this classroom, and all of a sudden there's something that just clicks and changes, and now they're acting out these different parts of their life, and they're being able to role play where they're reenacting scenarios that may be fictional or may be really close to their actual lives, and they're getting to look at it from another angle, and they're getting to like relive it and talk about and discuss and express how they would do it differently or what they did right and the impact of those types of choices. So, you know, they would be in there just goofing off and having so much fun, and like there's a different type of light within them. And it's because, like Louis was talking about, it's because of the arena that is being created by the people that are actually coming in, or the people that are around them that are willing to give them that space to be able to explore those most deep inner feelings that they wouldn't be able to when we're out there working out on the yard or walking the track or doing that type of thing. So what type of acting did you guys do? Because there's some recordings of this, Jim, and we have proof of some of this stuff right here. So we could actually, I know that Whitney would be able to share it later on, but yeah, what was like one of the most unique things that you were able to sit there and act out, Louis, like flying like a bird or something? What was it?
You know, so for me, there's two parts to theater that I love the whole, but just really two parts. There's a performance piece, and then there's a process. What I can't say what I enjoy more, but I love both. The process is such a beautiful creation in and of itself. Within that process, the things that we the things that we would do is like Lee gave a great description. Like for me, you know, that space, and you know, allowed me to really connect to my inner child, because at heart I'm just a goofball. I'm a jokester, and that allowed me to just really let the inner child out. And we would do all kinds of crazy different things, like you know, one of my favorite games is Zip Zap Saw. You know, I don't know how much sense that makes to everyone, but you know, it's just an example of the quirky and zany and fun things that we do. Like a lot of the exercises that we would participate in involved physicality, involved breathing, involved expression, and just different exercises. And I think too, like, and the performance, being able to present and being able to perform in front of an audience is probably one of the most liberating, powerful, and freeing experiences. Like, it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to get on a stage, and just be able to express and perform and to really connect to who you are, and especially if you're getting into a character, to be able to translate who you are into this, infuse who you are into this character and give it to the world, right? And and those are the things that we were doing inside. And what another beautiful thing about that is, like, we would have opportunities to perform these pieces in front of our families and friends. And how amazing is that? Especially if you think, like, my mom, she's 75 years old, and she's never seen me do anything positive.
We won't tell
She's
your
always
mom that you just exposed her age either right now.
Sorry, Mom. But she's never seen me do anything positive. My whole life, from 12 years old, I was arrested at 16. She was picking me up from police stations, juvenile halls. I gave her, I created such heartache for her. In prison, her visiting me, traveling, sending me money. Like, she's never seen me do anything positive. So when she came in to see me do that first performance in 2016 with Leah Jokey and Whitney, that was something, she saw me in a whole different light. Just I don't know if you guys can imagine that, but that was one of the most beautiful experiences for me, to be able to do that and give that to my mom, and be able to see, she could see me and say, look at what my son is doing within prison. These are the types of things he's doing. And just making my mom proud. So yeah, it's just awesome. Theater is an awesome thing. I don't know if I'm here to promote theater in prison, but I am. It's an awesome thing.